Hi everyone, super glad to be speaking at Vue Global. Today's talk is about two of my favorite technologies, Jamstack and Gridsome. Jamstack for the win static site generation with Gridsome. And by the end of the talk, I want people to leave with an understanding of what's possible with the Jamstack and how you can leverage Gridsome to build blazing fast websites. My name is Gift Egwenu. I'm a front-end developer, passionate people. If you'd like to find me or connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at LauraGift_, and also my personal website and my blog is at giftegwenu.com. If anyone is not familiar with the term Jamstack, I would like to say it's not just a buzzword that is flying around. It's a new way of building for the web. I'd like us to break down what the jam in the Jamstack actually means. First, J stands for JavaScript, which means this is what handles all the dynamic functionalities. Mind you, there is no restrictions on the language that can be used here. So this could be replaced with either Python, Ruby, or Go, because there are so many different static site generators out there that the underlying languages that are used for building it is not JavaScript. I'm just putting it out there so people know this. Then API here means that you have access to different third-party APIs that can be accessed using HTTP requests. And then lastly, markup here is that it means that your website gets bundled as HTML files at build time, and when you deploy it, it gets deployed to a CDN. Jamstack is a technique for building fast and secure websites, delivered by first pre-rendering the files and serving them directly from a CDN, removing the requirement to manage or run servers. Jamstack has changed the way we think and how we build websites right now. And I can only see how it gets better from here. But before we go more into the Jamstack and more into Gridsome, I would like us to look back at how we were actually building websites before Jamstack came into play. I would like to call this approach the traditional stack or the traditional approach. Here's an illustration of how traditional web applications were built. They relied mostly on server-side code to render and returns HTML on every request. So you have to query the server for every request and that is a very expensive approach. Oftentimes, this system would include a database or a CMS and any type of dynamic storage, adding a layer of latency and slow performance to your website. So this was the way people were building websites in the past, or people still do sometimes. Sometimes people still do this now, but I'm going to introduce you to a new approach called the Jamstack approach. And with the Jamstack approach, it removes all those complexities that you have to deal with the server, and you don't have to do that anymore. With the Jamstack, the browser renders just static HTML files which gets bundled at build time. This makes the process faster and way less complicated because you're not executing any server-side code. Another benefit of the Jamstack here is that your content gets served from a CDN, meaning that your content gets cached and served from the server that is closest to you. So I'm in Nigeria right now. When I'm trying to access a website that is built with the Jamstack, it gets served from a server that is closest to me. So a server in Africa instead of a server in the US. So that improves and impacts the performance of the website that I'm trying to access. Why should you build this way? If I've not already convinced you of some of the reasons why you should go with the Jamstack route, I have some benefits of the Jamstack here that could convince you. The first one here is that it has better performance. So because your site gets pre-built and your site gets pre-built at build time, it means that all your files get translated into static HTML files that is now served from a CDN, compared to the traditional approach where you have to make a request every time to the server. This would significantly improve the performance of your website. Another benefit is that it has a great developer experience. Right now, front-end developers enjoy having the best time and they don't want to struggle every time. And even though it's difficult to avoid struggling as a developer, but building with the Jumpstart gives developers a better sense of what it feels like when you're building with Bliss. So we can focus on the front end without having to deal with any monolithic architecture or any backend code. We have also a lot of services to leverage from that would help us extend the functionalities and even make our Jamstack sites more dynamic. Higher security here means that there is less or there is no server or database vulnerabilities because these are already taken care of most of the time. Half the time we always utilize platforms or APIs that already have this taken care of for us. So that is a big win in terms of how secure the Jamstack is. It's also very cheap and easy to scale. You can easily save money with deployment and you also spend less time in scaling. So if you have a product or a tool or a website that suddenly goes viral or blows up, it's easy for you to easily scale for your users. And that is a great win for also using the Jamstack. Now that we've covered what the Jamstack is and why you should use it, there are certain things I would like to point out what is not classified as a Jamstack. So the first thing here is that any site that is built with WordPress, Joomla, or Squarespace, you can't classify that as a Jamstack site because most of the time they are always using server-side rendered code. In this case, they always make requests to the server for everything that is required to be displayed on a website. Then any single page application that uses isomorphic rendering, meaning that your page here is rendered both on the server and on the client side, and it makes use of some backend code in the background. That is also not a Jamstack website. And then lastly, any monolithic application that relies on Node, Ruby, or any backend language is also not a Jamstack website. I hope that's clear. Quick fun fact, there is a high chance that you've already built a Jamstack website in the past without knowing it had a fancy name. This was me before I heard about the Jamstack, and I feel like most people would have had this experience as well. The Jamstack ecosystem is constantly growing every day. There is a massive number of services and tools available for you to leverage. Most of these tools are actually free and it helps you drastically improve the dynamic functionalities that you can build with a Jamstack website. Because imagine you having access to all of these services, you could bring them all together, not bring them all together per se, but bring specific parts of it together to build very dynamic websites. So that's something else the Jamstack really provides that I really like. Now that we've talked about the Jamstack, I'd like us to get into the most interesting part of this talk, which is Gridsome. Gridsome, what is it? Gridsome is a Vue-powered Jamstack framework for building static generated websites and applications that are fast by default. I know that you might be wondering, okay, why is she talking about Gridsome? Isn't there already VuePress, Nuxt, or even Gatsby? Why should I actually go ahead and use Gridsome? Here's what I think. I think Gridsome is awesome and there are several benefits it has and things that you might be interested in. So I would like to share some of those with you. First of all, Gridsome has automatic code splitting. So what this means is that Gridsome works super well with automatic code splitting, meaning that for every import you declare, your site gets bundled and served with each page. This means that your page only loads what you need at a specific time. And this can greatly improve the performance of your application. It also follows the PRPL pattern. This is a Google coined pattern and it means push, render, pre-catch, and lazy load. When you put all this together, it can help boost the performance of your applications. It also has smart link prefetching. Gridsome has a built-in component called glink component that works super well and it helps you prefetch your resources or your pages using intersection observer in the background. What this means is that if you're about to use or if you're about to navigate to a different page on a Gridsome website that already uses this glink components, it fetches the resources before you actually go to that page. So this would help improve the browser experience for the users and also make your website even more faster. It also has a wide range of plugins. It has a great plugin ecosystem, and it has a very very diverse plugin ecosystem that you could choose from. You can literally find a plugin for what you need. And even the better part is if you find out that there is no plugin for what you need, Gridsome provides APIs that can help you create those plugins. So you can even extend the functionalities of your Gridsome application by leveraging the Gridsome APIs, which I'll talk more on later. It also has different sources that you could use for your data. So you can use Markdown files, JSON files, external APIs, or even headless CMSs. The modern web is decoupled and modular. Gridsome makes it painless to build Jamstack websites using data from multiple sources, such as content APIs, headless CMSs, and other web services. Gridsome has a lot to offer, and I hope some of those benefits really made you think again about using Gridsome. How does it work? In the background, Gridsome has obviously two different ways that you can run it, either in development or in production mode. Gridsome has a centralized data layer. This is where all the data is being managed, and data can be pulled from different sources. So you can pull data from your local files, say Markdown, or your JSON files. You can also pull data from headless CMSs like Contentful, Strapi, or you can pull data from external APIs. So pulling data from all these different sources gets merged into a centralized data layer called the GraphQL data layer, which you can then use within your Vuejs components as GraphQL queries. And when you decide to deploy or build your Gridsome app, this gets rendered as static HTML files, and you can then deploy it to a CDN. So let's even look more at how it really works. Gridsome generates static HTML files that hydrate into a Vue.js SPA loaded in the browser. This means that you can both build a static and dynamic web apps with Gridsome. Now, for every HTML files that Gridsome builds, it also creates one JSON file. What this does is that after your page loads for the first time using the HTML, it then uses the JSON files to prefetch and load data for the next time it loads the page. It also uses Vue Router under the hood for routing and Vue Meta for managing head tags. And this is for SEO purposes, right? There are some concepts when you're working with Gridsome that you need to be familiar with. I'll try to break them down in this talk. The first one I would like to mention here is pages. Pages here are responsible for presenting your data at a URL. So each page would get generated statically and have its own index or HTML file. There are actually two ways of creating pages. You could create your page using the file system plugin or programmatically create your page using the pages API. With the file system plugin, within the source pages directory, any Vue.js component that you create there automatically becomes a page that you can visit in your Gridsome app. So if you create an about the Vue component, automatically generates a /about page that you can actually view in the browser. On the other hand, if you decide that you want to manually create your pages, you can use the pages API and the create pages hook inside of the Gridsome, the server.js file. I'll show you how to do that in a bit. Layout is another concept that you should be familiar with. Layout components are actually used to wrap pages. So you think of this as the header, the footer component, the sidebar component. This is where you would usually want them to exist. Collections, on the other hand, is a group of nodes, and each node contains field with custom data. Collections are useful if you're going to have either blog posts, tags, or products on your website. Now, Gridsome has a centralized data layer, like I said earlier, and we can see collections as part of that data layer. You have different collections in the centralized data layer. You could have posts, collection, tag collection, product collection, user collection. There are several different collections that you could create. And for each of those collections, they have nodes. You can also pull collections from, you can either create collections source for on your own or pull them from different data sources. So you could pull them from headless CMSs or different APIs. Templates, on the other hand, are used to create single pages for your nodes in a collection. So nodes need a corresponding page in order to be represented on its own URL. So if you have a blog collection, you need to create a blog template as well. Images are Gridsome components. G-image rather is a Gridsome component that helps you output optimized progressive image. So if you're working with Gridsome, I would advise you use G-image instead of using the normal image HTML tag, because G-image ships with some very interesting optimized image that you can resize and crop in real time when you're developing with Gridsome. The possibilities of what you could do with Gridsome is endless, and I've only scratched the surface. You can do so much more to extend the functionalities of what's possible with Gridsome. And there are two different ways or two different concepts that I would like to talk about here. First is the data store API and the pages API. Let's look at both in a very short demo. In this demo, we're going to look at how to use the pages API and the data store API. The pages API, the data store API is what we'll start with. The data store API allows you to insert your own data into the centralized GraphQL API data layer. Now, the cool thing here is if you decide that you don't want to use any external headless CMS for populating data into your application, you just want to create your own collection, this is where you would use the data store API. So let's take a look at first the GraphQL data, centralized data layer that I've been talking about. So when you run the Gridsome develop command, it also gives you access to this data layer where you can actually query or test out your GraphQL queries before using them inside of your Vue application. Now, this is with a freshly installed Gridsome application. I just get this, the metadata, the page, and the all page query. And now I want to create a blog post. This is just an example of how you query a GraphQL API, but I just want to create a blog post collection. So let's head back here and see how to do that. So the first thing I would like to do here is get this out of the way. Now you have access to this API.load source, and this is where you would add a collection, right? So the first thing here I would like to do is to create the collection that I would like to add. So I'll say const posts, and then we use the actions.add collection method. This allows you add a collection to the GraphQL data layer. And here I want to add a type name. So if you don't want to, you can leave it blank, but I want to add a type name here, call it blog posts, right? And now I can create my node. So I'll say posts.add node. And let's say we want a title for our node. For this node, we want my first blog post. I also want a date for this post, right? And a description as well. Would be great to have a description, a super nice description. A super nice description. Now that I've added this should be add node. Now that I've added this, typically, yeah, come on. Demos are actually not as smooth as you think they would go. But yeah, now that I've created this, I would go back to this GraphQL playground here and see if it's not added as query. So I have to rerun the command Gridsome develop, so it gets added to the GraphQL query. So here, right, action dot add collection, type name, blog posts. So the problem here is Gridsome actions is not defined. Interesting. Right, this should be actions instead. Fingers crossed this works. Great. So now, once this finish generating, we'll see that it's now populates this our new collection here, which when I refresh this, I should see it. Great. Yeah. Now I have the blog post collection, and I can query for all blog posts and just one blog post. But since I already have one, I'll just go ahead and query this. This is why I already have this here. So if I should query this, you see that I get the results that I added. So typically, if you're not going to be pulling in data from any external place and you just want to create your own data layer yourself, this is what you would use. Or if you're trying to create a source plugin, and if you're trying to create a source plugin from say a headless CMS, this is also the route that you would take. I hope that clarifies it for you. Now, for the next API we want to take a look at, which is the Pages API. This also lets you create custom pages. So the API is called after GraphQL schema has been generated. So you can query pages from them or use any other data. Now let's see how we can actually use this. So to use this, we need to use the create pages hook. First of all, what I would like to do here is call the create pages API that create pages, right? As we have it here, and say create page. We need to pass in a couple of things. We need to pass in the parts of the page that we want to create. So if it's say blog, should be the parts. Then we need to pass the component also. It should be in source slash templates slash blog.vue. Right. By passing in these two things, we can create pages manually instead of like doing it the other way where we would create it directly from here, like creating a Vue component, like we have this about.vue, right? So this is how you would create a page using the Pages API. Now let's look at the next way we can extend the Gridsome using the Pages API. The Pages API lets you create custom pages. And this is useful. This can be useful if you want to manually create pages for an external API or for a collection. So let's see how we can actually do this. And the way we do this is by using the create pages hook, which you already have the, specified here. So I want to create a page called blog.vue within the templates directory. So I'll use the create page here and pass in parts, which is what I would like that to be when I'm trying to access it from the browser, and also components, which is the component that I'm trying to use here. Right. So now if I refresh this, run the Gridsome develop command again, you can see here that it creates the GraphQL schema, also creates the pages and template every time that I run this command. So heading over to the browser, if I go to /blog, I would see that it has created the page for me. So localhost /blog. we should see this is a blog template, which I created within the templates directory, right? Remember that this only happens automatically if you create it within the pages directory. That's why if I have the about here and I go to /about your works, but here now I'm creating within the templates directory and I'm programmatically creating the page using the pages API. Now, there are some amazing websites out there that are already using Gridsome in production, which I would like to highlight some of them. There is this great website called Built with Gridsome that has some websites that already that built using Gridsome. And as you can see, these are ranging from SaaS websites to personal websites to, yeah, to even e-commerce. There are some e-commerce websites that are being built with Gridsome. So that just gives you an idea of how the Gridsome community and ecosystem is growing. So I'd like you to check them out and also check out some websites that already use Gridsome in production. And where do you go from here? So if you're interested in learning more about Gridsome and some of the things that I've talked about in my talk, I would advise that you check out the documentation first, and then also check out the site I shared previously, Built with Gridsome website. Then there are several articles and great tutorials out there, specifically on dev.to. You can check those out as well. And then lastly, the Gridsome Discord server community is also a great place to start. I hope you learned something from my talk. Thank you so much for listening. And don't forget that you can connect with me on social media. Happy to get any questions if there are any.